Okay, well, we want to thank everybody for coming back. We recognize that folks have just given up themselves in such deep ways, and we want to make sure that some of the questions that were burning in your hearts to ask of our speakers this morning, that you will have an opportunity to do that before we go to lunch. But if you happen to see them and they're available at lunchtime, don't let the discussion end here. And not just them, we're hoping that you will continue to communicate with each other and bounce off some ideas of how we can get this freedom, liberation movement, abolition movement going even stronger and harder, and that we can realize it in our lifetime. We have all of our...
I want to make, before Anika go any further, I want to just make an announcement about the QR code to Mrs. Anasted. A report. It's not working, but you can go on the DecARcerate website and get the information there, and we'll take care of it from there. Thank you.
Great. So we want to pose this question to all of the panelists and whoever wants to go first, but I think this is a great place to start, or we think it's a great place to start. What gives you hope?
I'll say what gives me hope is seeing all you people in here and many of the people across the country that I've worked with in solidarity to end this. I mean, just the fact that, NARCAC, which is a religious campaign with different faiths and leaders, right? Interdisciplinary faiths, is something that you never see, right? But people coming together for a common goal that are recognizing this is torture, right? Solitary confinement is torture. And seeing people from different faiths, from different colors, different countries, different states even, coming together to even hear about this and even have these discussions is beautiful, and that gives me hope.
One thing that gives me hope is my faith in Christ. Also, the ways that the laws are changing, and there's amendments that's going to allow lifers to be able to come out of prison. That's what gives me hope.
The direct action in Minnesota Labor Day weekend gives me hope, and the solidarity outside. I think, there's so many things that we're up against, but thinking about solidarity and what we can win, and seeing people organizing together.
I'm kind of with Michael, like being in spaces like this gives me hope, because it is so easy to become hopeless, right? When it's like we're fighting, and it seems like so often we're losing, but just coming back into community and being like, but we can still do this together. And just sometimes stepping back and just taking a breather and seeing some of the beauty and reevaluating and just looking at some of the wins you have had, like really makes a difference to me.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna field the next question to Anna. It said, do your research include women prison units? If so, have you noticed similarities, differences with the experiences of people in men units?
So DecARcerate and I think Believe Disability Arkansas did a kind of a very comprehensive numbers-driven report on solitary in 2021 that I bet Halim and Anika can direct you to. The reporting that I did with DeMarco was story-driven. I mean, I did look through reports and data, but it was not a comprehensive survey of solitary in Arkansas. So we were thinking about it as a complement to that report, like how to kind of get at the experience of what's happening, kind of beyond the numbers. So that's what we were aiming to do. So we went really deep into like one block, one cell block, and kind of what's happening. And then, I looked at death records all around, and but yeah, the answer is no. I didn't do a deep dive into solitary in the women's prison, and I don't want to speak to, what's outside what I really dug into, but that report, I recommend it.
And that report is on the DecARcerate website for those who are wanting to see it, so you can go there. Thank you so much, Anna. Michael, we're going to pose a question to you. What was your experience after being released from prison?
Yeesh. That was very surreal. It was different. I think I just had a conversation outside with somebody about it. Coming home, I remember the first thing, my mother actually picked me up and was driving me home. And I was driving down the street. Keep in mind, I've been locked up since 98. And this is 2017. And I noticed that everybody we passed by at the bus stops, walking down the street, everybody had their head down. I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, I'm used to people like, hey, you know, but people were literally walking around with their heads down. And so I would say technology, like learning how to engage with people nowadays is much different than in the past when I was home. People don't really engage no more. And then there was similar to what was mentioned earlier by Kazim when he came home. I was fortunate enough to also be blessed by some sisters who are actually feminists, who taught me the whole, they, them pronouns, feminism, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, all those things that I was never taught that you definitely need to know and learn to navigate this new world, right, we're living in. But I would say for the most part, it's still very challenging. I mean, I still have issues with, navigating technology, even being fearful of speaking, which is ironic because that's what I'm doing in front of people and even speaking to people that I don't know. Isolation can do that to you. It can make you very antisocial, but I've been trying to be more social and smile and talk to people instead of just being closed off to people. So, yeah.
Michael, I want to do this very quickly if you all will allow to participate in this. In the Poor People's Campaign, one of the things we would often do rather than clapping for people is to say, thank you, we love you, thank you, we love you. I think Michael needs to hear that. Yeah. Can we do that together? Thank you, we love you, thank you, we love you, thank you, we love you. Thank you so much. Yes. This is going to be for DeMarco's mom. Can you share on your experience as someone who deeply loves your son and who has been on solitary confinement, what that does to your heart? I mean, how do you grapple with it? How are you?
Well, like I said, first of all, it's my faith in Christ and my continued prayer life. My son been locked up 23 and a half years. He's 44. So he's been gone from me as much as he spent with me. The hard part is going to the prison and him not being able to return home. And he has a son that was born after he left, who's 22. Now he has a granddaughter who's 2 years old. That helps me cope with the fact of my son being gone. But even before them, it was much, much harder because it's like a part of your soul that's not intact with your body. And if you never experienced it, then it's something that you really might not understand. And also, it may be a cliche, but there is something about the son. It's something about a woman's son that very dear to her heart. And he is my oldest child and my only son. And I will never, ever, I've never given up, and I won't ever give up until he's on this side of freedom. It's going to happen. It's just going to be in God's timing. And I ask each and every one of you to continue to network and do whatever we can do, get these amendments going, because they gave him a life sentence. And in Arkansas, that's the first thing people want to say. That's no hope. It's been hope with me since 23 years ago, because I know he's not going to spend his entire life there. So he will be home.
Yes, he will. Ms. Vera, do you mind standing up and taking your cover up? Yes. You all need to see what's on the back of her t-shirt.
Okay, this is the amendment. that we're fighting for, and this would free my son.
Now look at that picture right there. That's why we need to do us on the front. That's why we need to do us on the front.
Can I say something real
Yes,
quick?
yes.
Just from my own experience, one thing I learned, all your homies, your friends, your girlfriend, whoever, they all fall off after a couple years, right? But mine, stood there forever, will never, ever leave me alone.
Yes. So Miss Vera, thank you, we love you. Thank you, we love Miss Vera. Thank you, we love you. Thank you, we love you. Yes, yes.
Sure.
And I also want to say very quickly, Miss Vera, as we were helping to register some people that were in Pulaski County Detention Center and take their ballots so that their votes counted, that there was a man standing beside me who had tears in his eyes because he had had a life sentence and had been forgiven, and he was coming for the first time to vote. So yes, your son will get out. Yes. Oh Lord, I did this. I have to look up here. This is a question for Janelle. And Janelle, there were kind of two parts to this. So what can the average citizen and or person do to help in incarceration as we know it? But then also, how can religious organizations, religious communities help to overcome solitary confinement?
So just the first part, we need to be involved, right? People need to know who their legislators are. Who are your local legislators? Oftentimes, folks are only voting in major national elections, but the ones who are going to change our states, the ones who are actually able to change the policies that are going to affect the prison systems within our states are our local elected in our state elected officials. We have to know who they are. We have to call them. We have to pay attention to when the bills are up. We have to support, right? Get your friends to say, hey, this bill is up. It's about incarcerated folks. Can you just make a call or send an email? I've drafted it up for you. Here it is. But we have to be engaged in the actual political system if we're going to change the laws. And the second part, as far as the church, I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to partner with those who are already doing the work. We need to help by supporting with finances, by showing up, by giving bodies. And as the church and spiritual bodies, we need to take a back seat, but support those who have been on the front line. So we don't need to start another coalition. We don't need to start another organization so that our church can be out there as the forefront. We need to partner with folks like DecARcerate, folks who are like Michael's organization. That's what we need to do. We need to align ourselves with the folks who are doing the work and be the help increase that power.
Thank you.
Also, they can go to NARCAT's National Religious Campaign Against Torture's website and sign the petition, the national petition to end solitary confinement.
And say the website one more time so everybody.
It's NARCAT, NRCAT. If you just Google NRCAT, it should pop up. But it's the National Religious Campaign Against Torture.
So can I add one more thing?
Yes.
It's also important that we talk about these things, right? In our actual congregations on Sunday mornings, on Saturday afternoons, whenever our religious organizations gather, we need to be talking about this. We need to be inviting people like Ms. Vera and Michael, have them come speak to your congregations so that there's a face behind it, so that people are actually, connected to your faith, So that's also important.
By Dustin Dickerson says, what are your alternative solutions for violent prisoners?
What are your alternative solutions for violent prisoners?
So in California, I can just speak for California, but in California for decades, since they first locked up George Jackson in solitary confinement in Soledad, they began to say that we need to lock up the worst criminals inside our penal system, right? So that's when they built Pelican Bay Prison. And they said, these are the worst inmates. But do you know, in 2016, when they let us all out, 90% of us were let out, violence on the yards went significantly down. Violence against officers, violence against staff, and violence amongst racial groups like Black and brown. So I think that an alternative would be to provide, I mean, let's just keep it simple, right? Hurt people. If you're gonna hurt and torture people and expect them to come home and be nice and rehabilitate, that's not gonna work. What's gonna work is what worked, I can say for myself and many others, is education. The number one recidivism tool to reduce recidivism that shows is higher education. Now, the higher education degree a person has, the less recidivism there is. California has a 70% recidivism rate. That means people recidivate within the first 6 months. But higher education helps reduce that. And also, for me, I would say it makes a person less violent. Once you know how to use the tools that are out there and use your brain instead of your fist. And the pen is mightier than the sword. So I would say teaching people how to use those tools and giving them that access to education.
Yes. Did anybody else on the panel want to add? Thank you so much, Michael. Okay.
Can I also add one more
Yes,
thing?
absolutely.
Sorry, I don't mean to take up all the space, but in regards to this, I think a beautiful thing that came out of the end of hostilities agreement inside California prisons, you have to understand, LA especially, it's really a racially divided city. You have South Central, which is primarily black, and you have East LA, which is primarily brown. Folks in those communities there's generational racism that is brought on. I remember my uncle coming home from prison and told me, why are you playing with that black kid? We don't mess with them. And in prison, I found out why. It's all segregated. But through the end of hostilities agreement, we were able to actually form a peace treaty in South Central amongst two of the biggest gangs in LA to come together and talk. And this is something that you're talking about, solution for violent prisoners. These were the most violent prisoners. Now, they were considered the most violent prisoners. Now creating one of the biggest peace treaties in Los Angeles' history. So I think that's how you turn violence into peaceful people, right? Teaching them these skills to be peace builders as well.
And I'll give you a two-part, I'm sorry.
I want to go to this young man because he done stood up. Take care of your business.
Here, without doubt, better food is going to cut down violence in prison. Research has been done. Better food, multivitamins, 25% reduction in violence. It's known. It's been double-blind test proved.
And
Thank you, Larry.
I think that's great. I would also say, instead of putting people in prison, put people where they can be helped, right? And most people don't get help in prison. In fact, I don't know anybody that has.
And I would also like to offer this here because I personally has experienced this. As Michael said, education and communication is very important. We must teach each other how to become active listeners, which was a skill that Morgan taught me when I was incarcerated. She used to come down and teach a class on communication. And one of the lessons within the class was becoming an active listener. A lot of conflicts within the prison system happen because we're not listening to each other. We're not repeating what we think the other person said to give them the opportunity to confirm that they said that or deny that they said that. So a lot of, like as Michael highlighted, it verged on education. A lot of times when we ask the question, well, what we do with the violent offenders? Well, we teach them how not to be so violent, about how to communicate with each other. Because a lot of times, guys who go to prison at a young age of prison period, we hide behind our emotions and we really don't never address, what we're feeling. You ask the average guy that's incarcerated right now, how you doing? I'm all right. Well, what do all right mean? Yeah, I'm good. What the good mean? So when we give people the tools to really to access their feelings and to learn how to communicate that cuts down on a lot of misunderstandings within the prison system also. So as Michael said, education is primary, and I'm gonna agree with the young man back there. If you're not so hungry, you're not so grouchy.
Angry.
So, Anna, there's actually a couple of questions, and I'm going to try to put them together for you. So, one of them says, you have tried to go in and get information. So, investigating, reporting, we know is not always easy. So, what are some of the struggles that you found in doing that? But then also, in your FOIA request, how or have you found that solitary has been used to in Arkansas to compensate for understaffing and overcrowding? So it's kind of two questions. One is some of the challenges in trying to investigate inside, but also do they use solitary to justify the means to help fund or keep those evil systems open?
In my experience, there are things that I have and haven't been able to get. For example, the log of the security round, like who made a round and when at what time, and then the annotated security footage of like what actually happened to compare those against. I wouldn't have been able to get either of those if someone hadn't died, and the Arkansas State Police hadn't investigated that. So every death, the Arkansas State Police does an investigation. When they're done with it, those files then are able to be FOIA'd. Until they're done, they're not open to the public, and no other, like I requested the logs for the day before Adam Green died, to see, because everybody was talking about this one sergeant and what happened, and they were like, nope, like that's a security issue, we're not going to give that to you. The same with security footage. There are lawsuits that can be done, and there are ways to push, and then there's also things are really hard to get, and they can blame a lot on security, like not release things in the name of security. So that's a thing. In terms of, and then another example is Rashawn Webb. A lot of people were saying that he had all of these disciplinaries for failure to keep your person. And everybody was saying it was because he wouldn't cut his locks. And I put it in a data request for the disciplinaries, like the forms that had been completed. And that also is, they don't have to give it to you. They only have to give you a list of like the category, like failure to keep personal record. So they wouldn't give me the actual form that the guard filled out, for example. So I went off of what everybody was saying around him in writing that. But it leaves a lot of space for the prison then to come back and be like, that's not what happened, or like, that's not what we said, because they won't share the information. So those are some things. In terms of whether solitary is being used as a response to understaffing, I mean, I think understaffing in general, I don't like to use that term because I think actually it's overpopulating. Like, we need to send people home from prison. But I think that is an excuse often for lockdowns, which are essentially simulating solitary by just not letting people out, even if they're not in solitary punitively. And that was what was happening in Minnesota when they did the strike. When they did the action, they were like, you're forcing all of us to be stuck in our cells without any contact, without the ability to move around. That's a super common thing in response to quote unquote understaffing. In terms of whether people are being punished more or like given more disciplinaries in response to not as many, like I don't have that kind of information. I think there are so many factors, and so much of it is so subjective around somebody's mood that day. It's so there's so much going on that's never going to show up in an employer request around like how things are actually going, why a guard is particularly angry that day, or why there's so much power that happens just on the ground. So I don't know if that addresses that question, but those are some thoughts.
Thank you. Michael and Mama Vera, I'm going to ask you these questions, and if anybody else on the panel wants to answer as well. But first, Michael, there were several questions asked of you. How were you able to maintain your mental health and wellness while you were in solitary for so long? Somebody specifically said that Khalif Browder was placed on solitary for 700 days. And so it's a twofold question. So how were you able to maintain your mental health and wellness? And then also what needs to happen so that there's mental health support, not only for the persons that are inside, but for their families as well. And that's where I'd like for both you and Ms. Vera to respond to that part.
Yeah, I'd definitely say it was my mom who always supported me and was there for me, gave me that hope. And then, but mostly I did a lot of, I did a lot of meditation, did a lot of artwork, a lot of reading. And quite frankly, I took out my frustrations on the system and my oppressors through the pen, through litigation. Soon then brought me a lot of satisfaction. I remember when I was sitting in my cell and they pulled me out to have a meeting with the defendants in my first lawsuit. And the judge, they sent a magistrate judge to do a settlement conference. And I just remember that how empowering I felt that day, even though I was in my prisoner jumpsuit, shackled down, but sitting in the room with suits and attorneys were asking me, little old me, Michael, what do you want to make this thing go away? Like, how much money do you want to go to end this little lawsuit, right? And I was like, wow, now I have the power has switched, right? And winning my first lawsuit just kind of like gave me that empowerment and that mindset of, you know what, these people they're not made of steel, they're not unbreakable, right? And then through the hunger strikes, seeing people literally coming together from every group, pushing, even people who weren't in solitary confinement on the general populations, sacrificing their time, meaning their freedom, because people were getting written up for this. And actually, people who were joining the hunger strikes were written up for gang activity because they were saying this is being commanded by the gang leaders, and therefore anybody who's participating is participating in gang activity, and then they're putting them in the shoe or in solitary. So I think that gave me a lot of hope to see people doing that, and then also winning my lawsuits, right? So that gave me a lot of inspiration and motivation.
A lot of mine is, with it being my son, I feel like a complete responsibility. But also, he has a cousin sister that shares a lot of Tony Jennings. She shares probably a lot more responsibility than I do because she do all his paperwork, all his groundwork, and she also helps him out financially. And he'll go to her a lot of times with things that he need on that level. So, that's a great plus. So by me, I still maintain a busy life because I still have a full-time job and I have, grandchildren and great-grandchildren and everything. So I still maintain a good life. Aside from him being away, I still do my part to make sure he's okay and make sure he has things that he needs. But it's not 100% directly on me because she bears a lot of the burdens and she can handle him in a lot of ways better than I can because, I don't ever go toe-to-toe with him. It's what he says, that's what's going on, it happened. But she can say, now, DeMarco, you might need to think about that, or just wait before you do that, or wait before you say that. And, with me, I don't remember what DeMarco said to do. So that helps a whole lot.
Thank you, we love you. Thank you, we love you. Yes, so did y'all want to speak, or I was going to say, did anybody want to speak to how mental health is essential and ways that we can improve making sure that people that are inside as well as their family members get that type of support?
Yeah, I would say for me, part of my lawsuit was the lack of mental health care in solitary confinement because there literally is none. But then we also have to deal individually with, myself growing up in a machismo family, and prison is even more machismo. It doesn't look cool if you go out and talk to the psychs or you're on psych meds, right? So that's something within our own culture that we have to start to demystify, right? Or decriminalize, right? And instead of looking at our brother like, oh, you're a J-cat or you're weak because you're going for to get the white man's medicine or whatever, instead of dealing with this type of man. We need to stop pushing that type of mindset on other people and embrace mental health services, whether it be indigenous ways or other. Me personally, I am now finally, after all this time, have a life coach, which helps a lot. I guess that's a new way of saying therapist, right? She's also a Black woman, which helps a lot because she understands, the differences, right? Whereas opposed to a couple of times I did see a psychologist in prison, and even out here, and I'll tell you, it was no offense to anybody, but it was an older white man, and he couldn't relate to anything I had to, I was experiencing. So there was really no dialogue. I felt like I was just, complaining to somebody rather than getting any type of help. So I think two things that need to change. One is that culture of, mental health is stigma. And then the second thing, we need to get more Black and brown and people of color to be therapists and counselors and people who are also directly impacted, right? Because you can't understand something if you've never experienced it, right?
We have a question from the hat box up there. I'm pointing at you.
Well, I kind of wanted to just speak on it because it only gives you 160 characters. So, when I was detained in Greene County, I did 30 months voluntary confinement, right? But those increments go up depending on, I guess, the infraction commit. So, I want to know how we address that. Like, is there research being done on detention centers as well? And I also know locally here in Pulaski County, I just want to speak to the fact that there are people who are addicts, and what people who don't know what addicts are, they're administrative segregation. So some people, the whole time I was there, some people don't even come out of their rooms at all. And I believe that has something to do with their mental capacity and the mental state of how long they're being kept in there. So how do we really address right here locally where we are? Because there are people right here in Little Rock that I know have gone on more than 60 days, more than a year, and some of them aren't coming out, or they get to come out 1 hour, or maybe a week, or just when they have time, sometimes due to staffing, sometimes just due to regards, attitude towards their job.
Anybody address CrossFit?
I actually think ad seg is worse than shoe, right? Because you're stripped of everything. It's kind of like getting arrested again, right? That first night in the drunk tank, in the holding cell by yourself, it's cold. You miss everything that you had out there. So I think it's definitely a solitary confinement. But I think one of the things that is a good example of how to pass policy or legislation is the Mandela Act, where we're asking for more out-of-cell time. We're asking for resources as well as educational programs for people. If you're going to keep people in there more than 15 days, you have to start giving them programming. So I think if you look up the California Mandela Act, I think it will give you a good idea and maybe even a blueprint for something to try to start a bill here in Arkansas.
Absolutely. And just to think, organizing, y'all. Organizing is so important. As we saw Michael organizing while he was incarcerated, organizing while you're out, we have to organize. So it's one thing if one person is saying, hey, this is unjust, this is happening to me. But when you start talking to everyone who's on the floor, okay, you were in the shoe for how long, you were there for how long, and now we're going to bring our power together, that's when the legislators start to take notice. That's when it's like, okay, I have more than one letter. Okay, this is my 10th letter, this is my 20th letter. And now you're telling your family members to also, right, and those people who are in their jurisdictions who actually have the vote, right? So now they're not just getting letters from the folks who are inside, they're also getting letters from the constituents and the people they need to actually vote them into office. So recognizing that even though they try to strip us and try to strip folks who are incarcerated of their power, there's still power. So I think remembering that you still have power is also really key.
And we're gonna have to stop, and I know there were some other great questions, but we wanna encourage you to continue if the panelists are willing to speak with you, but again, you can speak among yourselves. Don, I'm gonna say this is the first time I've seen you live and in person, and what a blessing it is to see you free. So Don is not only an organizer and an activist, and she made sure that people got to vote while Don was inside. Don advocated and was an activist, and as many ways that Don was able to make sure that people on the outside didn't forget not only that she was in there, but how many other people were in there needed to get out. So thank you, Don.
We love you.
We love you.
Love you. Thank you. We love you.
Thank you. We love you.
Yes.
And I also would like to say that we at DecARcerate are actively working on a bill that addresses the Mandela rules, and we are looking forward to introducing that to the public in the near future.